obviously we've been through a very dry period this year, but hopefully it's coming right now. A while ago I was making comments about how farmers need to be planning for the longer term, and what I'm really talking about is how the system is set up to be resilient to variations in the environment. And beef and lamb right now have got a workshop going around the country talking about resilience. So what we mean by resilient systems are those that are able to handle variability in their environment and still produce a good productivity and profitability from the operation. So resilient systems have those sorts of characteristics.
It's logical. So what are we looking at?
What are we looking at? Obviously on the east coast of both islands, most of the sheep and beef are on dry land, okay, or in hill country, whatever. The real issue there is if and when things go dry. And it's quite interesting if you look at the NIWA data, and you can go back about 30 years, for example. We did this at Hororata a couple of years ago, and the average rainfall is between 60 and 80 millimetres a month, every month of the year. We say it's a summer dry environment, but the January rainfall is not really different from the August one. The real issue is how variable it is. And you've got huge variability in midsummer and in winter, surprisingly, and much less variability in spring and autumn. So it's handling that variability that's the real issue. And I think we would argue that there's 3 or 4 things that farmers need to be doing to handle that variability and get high productivity every year. The first one is that the faster you can grow your lambs or your cattle, the more flexibility you've got to handle that variability. So that comes down to feed quality. You really need to have feed that's 11.5 megajoules or more throughout the growing season. Now, as soon as it gets dry, that's going to drop. We accept that. But you've got to keep it at that level while it's actively growing. And you've got to be aiming for at least 300 grams a day, birth to sale, on your lambs. And if you're not getting that, you need to be looking at that feed quality. A couple of ways of doing that. Obviously, there are high nutrient value species around, lucerne, the herbs, plantain, chicory, etc., that will give you that high quality. And they maintain their quality better if they're not grazed absolutely correctly. The problem with them generally is low winter growth, and they are a bit more complicated and they are a bit more costly than traditional conventional pasture systems. So on conventional pasture systems, you really got to have a high stocking rate in order to keep those pastures growing actively and keep the quality up. So those are your choices.
Another option?
The problem, of course, with a high stocking rate is that you then increase the risk, the consequences of running out of feed. So the second thing that you've really got to have is flexibility to change your stocking rate quickly. If we're talking about resilient systems that are going to operate well in good years as well as bad years, because sometimes with low stocking rates, pasture quality deteriorates in good years and farmers sort of almost guarantee poor performance. So if we're going to guarantee good performance in good years as well, you've got to have high stocking rates. And that means stocking to above average conditions, but with the flexibility to retreat from that quickly when you need to. Flexible stock classes, older cattle, the cull ewes that are destined to leave the farm, you can mate them earlier so that they can be sold earlier if necessary. So there's various options in terms of flexible stock classes. The third point then is if you've got a high stocking rate, you've got flexibility to change that stocking rate quickly, when do you actually do it? And what we did at Silverwood, if you remember, Rob, a few years ago, we monitored soil moisture. And as soon as soil moisture got down to a level where we thought it was too dry to continue, we started selling sop. So we had an environmental monitor that triggered a destocking on that property. So it's those three key points: high pasture quality and high lamb growth rates, high stocking rates and the flexibility to move quickly, and then a trigger that tells you that you've got to do it. Obviously, sometimes if you react to the trigger, it's getting dry, and then 3 or 4 weeks later it starts raining again, you probably won't make as much money as you would have done if you'd have hung on. That's gambling. That's not risk management. So if we're going to have high productivity year after year, you need to be responding to that trigger.